On the wedding day, imagine standing at the altar dressed in white, your heart pounding with happiness, only to discover that the man you love has disappeared without a trace. This is the story of Emma, a woman whose dream of perfect love was shattered in a single devastating moment. But what she didn't know was that this unexpected abandonment would lead her to an encounter with true love, in a place and with a person she never imagined. Emma stood at the altar, her heart racing with anticipation. The soft hum of the guests' voices faded as she looked ahead, expecting to see Nathan, the man she had spent years dreaming of marrying. Her dress, white and perfect, swayed gently with the breeze. The church, bathed in golden light, seemed to glow with the promise of her perfect day. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life. But as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Emma began to feel an unsettling shift. She glanced down the aisle, expecting Nathan's familiar face to appear, but instead, the cold, empty path stared back at her. She could hear the muffled whispers of the guests, their confusion growing louder. Her breath hitched as she looked to the side, desperately trying to catch a glimpse of him. The air seemed to thicken, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. Where is he? She thought. Why isn't he here? Panic started to creep in, but she forced herself to breathe, to stay composed. She looked at the priest, who seemed equally confused, and then turned her gaze back to the guests. They were all watching her, their eyes filled with concern. Minutes passed, then an hour. Her heart was beating so loudly now it was almost impossible to think. Each tick of the clock, each whisper from the crowd was like a knife slicing through her, but she couldn't move. She stood frozen, the weight of the dress now feeling heavier than it ever had before. She could hear the faint sound of her heels tapping against the marble floor as she shifted her weight, but her feet seemed glued to the spot. The church doors, which had been swung open in eager anticipation, now felt like a portal to a dark and lonely world. Every second that passed felt like a small eternity, stretching further and further from the dream she had been holding on to for so long. A wave of nausea rose in her throat. This wasn't supposed to be happening. Nathan, her high school sweetheart, the man she had loved for years, was supposed to be standing at the altar beside her. She had dreamed of this day for so long, imagining the moment they would exchange vows, promising to spend the rest of their lives together. But now she was standing here, alone, while the world around her seemed to move in slow motion. And then, finally, the reality hit her like a cold slap. Nathan wasn't coming. He's not coming. The thought echoed in her mind, growing louder and louder. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she felt as if the entire church was closing in on her. She looked around, searching for answers, but no one seemed to have any. The guests' eyes bore into her, pity written all over their faces. She could feel the sting of their sympathy, but it only made the pain in her chest worse. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if her entire world was unraveling in front of them. She took a step back, her hands trembling as she tried to hold herself together. The dress, once a symbol of hope and joy, now felt suffocating. She could hear the faint sound of her own breath, shallow and uneven, as she slowly turned to face the door. She was about to leave, to run away from this nightmare, when she heard the priest's voice calling out to her. "Emma, are you okay?" But his words barely reached her ears. She felt like she was drowning in the sea of confusion and heartbreak, unable to grasp what was happening. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts, but the reality kept crashing down on her like waves she couldn't escape. Nathan, the man she thought she would marry, the man she had given her heart to, had left her standing at the altar. The weight of the words felt like a physical blow. It was hard to breathe, hard to think. She wanted to scream, to run out of the church and never look back, but her legs felt weak, her body refusing to move. She was frozen in place, trapped in a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. Her mind raced back to the days before the wedding. They had spent months planning everything, picking out flowers, tasting cakes, and dreaming of their future together. Nathan had seemed so excited, so in love, just as she was. They had made promises to each other, shared intimate moments, and imagined a life full of love and laughter. She had trusted him, believed in him with every fiber of her being. But now, here she was, abandoned, humiliated, and alone. A small part of her wanted to believe that something had happened, that maybe Nathan was just stuck in traffic or had gotten lost on the way. But the longer she stood there, the more she realized the truth. He had made a choice. He had chosen to leave her. As the days passed after the wedding disaster, Emma found herself sinking deeper into a world of silence. The life she had envisioned, the future she had planned, now seemed like a distant memory, slipping away as quickly as the moments that had led her to this point. It was as though the universe had conspired to shatter her dreams in one single instant, leaving nothing but the fragments scattered around her, too broken to piece together. She spent days in a haze, unable to find the energy to face the outside world. Her apartment, once a place filled with joy and excitement as she prepared for her new life with Nathan, now felt like a cold and empty prison. The wedding dress, still hanging in the corner, mocked her every time she passed it. The veil, the shoes, the bouquet, all the elements of the day that should have been filled with love, now served as painful reminders of what had been stolen from her. Her friends, family, and well-meaning neighbors reached out to comfort her, but their words felt hollow. "He doesn't deserve you," they would say. "You're better off without him." But those words did nothing to ease the ache in her chest. How could they understand? How could anyone understand the depth of the loss she felt? They hadn't seen her eyes light up when she talked about their future. They hadn't witnessed the promises they had made to each other under the stars. Emma had given Nathan everything, her heart, her trust, her future, and he had walked away without a second glance. The pain was suffocating, a constant presence in her life that followed her wherever she went. She tried to go to work, but even the simplest tasks seemed impossible. She would sit at her desk staring blankly at her computer screen, unable to focus. Her mind would drift back to that moment at the altar, the look on Nathan's face when he wasn't there, the empty seat where he was supposed to be. The silence of it all haunted her, echoing in her mind, keeping her awake at night. The grief wasn't just for Nathan. It was for the life she had imagined, the wedding, the honeymoon, the house they were supposed to buy together, the children they had dreamed of raising, all of it, now gone. And with it, her sense of self. Who was she without Nathan? Who was she without the promise of that future? It was as if she had lost not just the man she loved, but the person she had become in his presence. For the first time in years, Emma found herself questioning everything she had believed in. She had always been the hopeful one, the dreamer. She had always believed that true love could overcome any obstacle, that there was someone out there for everyone. But now, all of those beliefs felt like lies. Love had let her down. It had abandoned her when she needed it most. The man she had trusted had walked away without a second thought, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life that had been shattered beyond repair. Her family tried to console her, of course. Her mother, a woman who had always been there for her, would call every day asking if she needed anything. "You know, Emma," her mother would say in her soothing voice, "you don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to grieve, it's okay to let it all out." But how could she? How could she allow herself to fall apart when everyone around her expected her to move on, to be strong for them? She had always been the responsible one, the one who took care of others. But now she had no idea how to take care of herself. The worst part was the loneliness. At night, when the world outside was quiet, Emma would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness creep in around her. The bed felt too big, too cold. There was a time when she had imagined Nathan beside her, his warmth filling the space, his arms around her, protecting her. But now the bed was just a reminder of how much she had lost. It was a place where she could no longer dream of the future, where she could no longer imagine a life that included him. Her friends, though well-meaning, tried to pull her out of her despair. They invited her to dinners, to weekend get-togethers, but she couldn't bring herself to go. How could she explain to them the suffocating weight of her grief, the gnawing pain that refused to let her go? How could she tell them that no matter how much she smiled, no matter how many times she said, "I'm fine," the emptiness inside her only grew deeper? So she withdrew further into herself, distancing herself from the world around her until all she had left were the memories and the questions. What had gone wrong? Where had Nathan gone? Why hadn't he come back? The questions consumed her, swirling in her mind like a storm she couldn't escape. She replayed every moment they had shared, searching for clues, for signs that might have explained his sudden departure. But there were none. There was no warning, no indication that he was unhappy, no hint that he was capable of leaving her at the altar. She had loved him with everything she had, and yet, here she was, alone. It wasn't until one evening, when she stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun set over the city, that the reality of it all began to sink in. Nathan was never coming back. He had chosen a different path, one that no longer included her, and as painful as it was, Emma knew that she had to let go. She had to stop clinging to the past, to the life that could never be. It was time to accept the truth. Nathan was not the man she thought he was, and the future she had dreamed of was never going to happen. But even in that moment of realization, Emma felt a flicker of something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't a big, overwhelming feeling, but it was there, buried deep within her. She knew it wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. She had spent so many years defining herself by the relationship she had with Nathan, but now she was starting to see that she was more than just the woman who had been left at the altar. She was Emma, a strong, resilient woman who had survived heartbreak and could survive this too. Emma had spent weeks locked in her apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life she had once thought was perfect. The windows were closed, the curtains drawn, and the world outside seemed as distant as her once bright future. Every corner of the apartment seemed to whisper the promise of a life she would never have. The wedding dress still hung in the corner of her bedroom, untouched, its lace and satin mocking her with the image of a woman who had been abandoned. And there she was, unable to move forward, unable to let go. But one morning, when the weight of her grief became unbearable, Emma decided she couldn't stay locked away any longer. The loneliness had begun to suffocate her, and she needed a breath of fresh air, even if it was just for a moment. She had always loved mornings, the quiet moments before the world truly woke up. With a sigh, she stood from the couch, feeling the exhaustion of sleepless nights weigh heavily on her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen from the tears, but she didn't care. She put on a simple jacket and left her apartment, stepping into the crisp air of the city. The streets were quieter than usual, as if the city itself was still recovering from the events of the past weeks. The hustle and bustle of the busy world outside seemed so distant to Emma, as if she were watching it all from behind a glass wall. She wandered aimlessly, her feet taking her to places she hadn't visited in a while. It was as if she were searching for something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside her. It was then that she stumbled upon a small cafe, tucked away on a quiet street corner. The warmth from the cafe's windows spilled out into the street, inviting her in. But Emma hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to be around people yet. But something about the place caught her attention. Perhaps it was the smell of fresh coffee or the sound of laughter drifting from inside. It felt like a small oasis in the midst of her emotional storm. With a deep breath, Emma stepped inside. The warmth enveloped her as soon as she entered. The cafe was cozy with soft lighting and a welcoming atmosphere that seemed to embrace her. The sounds of clinking cups and quiet conversations filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, Emma felt a sense of calm. She walked to the counter, ordering a simple cappuccino, her voice soft as if she were afraid of disturbing the peace. As she waited for her drink, Emma took a seat by the window looking out at the street. She could see the sunlight beginning to filter through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the city. It was a beautiful day, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to appreciate the small, fleeting moments of beauty in the world around her. But her thoughts were interrupted when a man approached her table. He was standing by the counter, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he finally walked over to her. He wasn't tall, nor was he particularly striking, but there was something in the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence mixed with kindness that drew her attention. He smiled softly as he asked, Is this seat taken? Emma looked up at him, startled by his unexpected question. For a moment she didn't know what to say. She had spent so much time alone, so much time wrapped up in her own sadness, that she had almost forgotten what it was like to have a simple conversation with a stranger. She shook her head and smiled weakly. No, it's not taken, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The man sat down across from her, placing a small cup of coffee in front of him. He took a sip and then looked at Emma again, his gaze gentle but sincere. I couldn't help but notice that you seemed a little lost, he said. I know that sounds strange, but sometimes you can just tell when someone's going through something. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to people noticing her pain, let alone talking about it so openly. She tried to smile, but it was weak and her lips trembled slightly. It's been a tough few weeks, she admitted, not sure why she was telling this stranger so much about herself, but somehow it felt right. He nodded as if he understood more than she could explain. Sometimes life throws us these curveballs, he said softly. It's like we think we know where we're going, and then suddenly, everything changes. But you know, sometimes those changes can lead us to something better, even if we can't see it right away. Emma looked at him, studying his face. There was a kindness in his eyes, a warmth that seemed genuine. She wasn't used to being spoken to like this by someone who wasn't trying to fix her, but just to listen and understand. She felt a small spark of something inside her, something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. What's your name? She asked, her voice slightly stronger now. Ben, he replied with a smile. And you? Emma. Ben took a deep breath, then spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I don't know what you're going through, Emma, but I can tell that you're strong. You just need to remind yourself of that sometimes. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. For so long she had been lost in the fog of her own pain, unable to see a way out. But Ben's words, simple yet so genuine, made something inside her shift. She wasn't sure what this moment was or why she was suddenly opening up to this stranger, but for the first time in weeks she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. Ben and Emma spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. He told her about the cafe he owned, how he had moved to the city from a small town, hoping to create something meaningful with his life. She shared a little about her past, about Nathan, about the dreams she had lost. But she also found herself laughing, something she hadn't done in what felt like forever. Ben had a way of making her feel like she was seen, not for her pain, but for the person she was deep inside. When it was time for her to leave, Emma felt a sense of reluctance. She hadn't expected to find this kind of comfort in a stranger, and yet, here she was feeling lighter than she had in days. As she stood to leave, Ben smiled warmly at her. I hope you come back sometime, Emma, he said, his voice kind but sincere. It's nice talking to someone who's real. For the first time in weeks, Emma smiled genuinely. I think I will. As she walked out of the cafe, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. She didn't know where this new connection would take her, or if it would lead to anything more. But one thing was certain. This encounter with this unexpected stranger had opened a door inside her heart that she had kept closed for far too long. And as she walked down the street, her steps felt a little steadier, the sun shining a little brighter. And for the first time she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for the future after all. As the days turned into weeks, Emma found herself returning to the cafe more and more. It became her sanctuary, a place where she could escape from the noise of her life, where her pain didn't feel so overwhelming. And each time she stepped inside, there he was, Ben, always with a kind smile, always ready to listen. Their conversations, once small and fleeting, grew deeper, and Emma began to realize that she was looking forward to them more than she had ever anticipated. The more they spoke, the more Emma found herself drawn to Ben, not in the way she had been drawn to Nathan, with an idealized version of love and a perfect future, but something real, something grounded. Ben didn't try to fix her, He didn't promise her a fairy tale. Instead, he just allowed her to be herself. And in his presence, for the first time in months, Emma felt like she was enough. She wasn't just someone who had been abandoned at the altar or someone defined by her past. She was Emma, a woman who had faced heartache and yet was still standing. It wasn't just the way Ben listened to her, but the way he shared his own vulnerabilities. He talked about the struggles he'd faced when he first moved to the city, how he had come from a small town with big dreams, and how at times he had doubted if it was all worth it. But even in those moments of doubt, he had kept going. Sometimes, Emma, the hardest part is just getting up every day and putting one foot in front of the other, he'd say with a quiet strength that resonated with her, and the more she listened to him, the more she admired his resilience, his ability to find joy in the simple things, even when life didn't go as planned. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Emma found herself heading to the cafe earlier than usual. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was missing, that there was something she needed to face. When she entered, Ben was there, as always, behind the counter, a gentle smile on his face when he saw her. "Hey, Emma," he said. "You look like you could use a cup of coffee. Want your usual?" Emma nodded, grateful for his understanding. As she sat down, Ben placed the steaming cup in front of her and sat down across from her, a soft but knowing look in his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last few days settling on her shoulders. "I don't know, Ben," she said quietly. "I've been trying so hard to move on, to let go of everything that's happened, and yet, I still feel stuck. Like I'm not really living, just existing." Ben didn't say anything right away. He just looked at her, his expression soft but full of understanding. Finally, he spoke. "You know, Emma, it's okay to not have it all figured out. It's okay to be lost for a little while. It doesn't mean you won't find your way again. Sometimes the way forward is the hardest to see." His words lingered in the air between them, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to feel the weight of his kindness. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but in that moment she realized that she didn't have to have everything figured out. She didn't have to have the perfect answer to her pain, but maybe, just maybe, she could take small steps toward healing, toward finding peace in the chaos. As the conversation continued, Emma couldn't help but notice how much Ben had come to mean to her. It wasn't just the way he listened, or how he always seemed to know exactly what to say. It was the way he made her feel, seen, heard, and understood. It was the way his presence filled the empty spaces that had once been filled by Nathan, and now, those spaces didn't feel as hollow. She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but as the days passed, Emma began to notice something shifting inside her. She started to realize that her feelings for Ben were no longer just those of a friend. There was something deeper there, something she had tried to ignore, but could no longer deny. It was the way her heart fluttered when he smiled at her, the way his laughter made her feel like everything would be okay. The connection she had with Ben wasn't perfect, but it was real. And as she sat there with him, talking about everything and nothing, she felt something stir inside her, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Love. One afternoon, as Emma was leaving the cafe, Ben walked her to the door. He seemed hesitant, as if there was something he wanted to say but didn't know how. Emma turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath catching in her throat. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben looked at her for a moment as if weighing his words. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," he said finally. "But I care about you, Emma. I care about you more than I thought I would, and I just—" He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I don't want to pretend like I'm not feeling this, like I'm not falling for you." Emma's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing as she processed his words. The world seemed to stop for a moment, and all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing, the weight of his confession hanging in the air between them. She had always been so afraid of getting hurt again, of giving her heart to someone who would break it. But here, In this moment, with Ben standing before her, she realized something. She had spent so long running from the possibility of love that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly loved. And in that moment, she realized that she had been falling for him too. Without thinking, Emma reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it over his. "I care about you too, Ben," she said softly. "I think I've known for a while, but I was too afraid to admit it." Ben's eyes softened and he smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "But I'm here, Emma, and I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, Emma realized that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about finding someone who could erase the past or make everything better. It was about finding someone who would stand by you through the highs and lows and help you rebuild when everything felt broken. And for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe in the possibility of love again. Not the kind of love that was idealized or perfect, but the kind that was real, messy, and beautiful in its own way. As they stood there hand in hand, Emma knew that this wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. And for the first time in months, she felt a sense of hope stirring deep within her. With Ben by her side, she knew that whatever came next, she wouldn't have to face it alone. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the power of second chances? Do you believe we can truly heal a broken heart? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where fate brought you something unexpected, changing the course of your life? Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching this video from. I want to hear your story. If you believe that love and true friendship can heal any pain, subscribe to the channel. But only if you also believe that the true value of life lies in the connections we make, not in perfection. Share this message with someone who needs hope and don't forget to like it.